Tom. You're not usually up here at the same time as me. That's pretty cool. Oh, sorry. I think he's saying the music in this church is too loud. No. Today we're picking up where we started 2 weeks ago in this series. So what we're doing is all through the summer, we're looking at little words that can change your life. And so we started this, as I said, 2 weeks ago with a little word. And so I would feel a lot better if somebody could remember what that word was. Anybody remember what the word was? Wow. That was good. You guys, there was a lot of you. That was good. So for today's message, it's going to be a little different because for that one, I gave you the word right up front and then we just kept referring to it all the way through. Today is different because we're not actually going to get to the word until the very end. We're going to kind of work our way toward the word through the entire message. And so this morning, what I want to do is I want to start with a simple, but I think very important question. And here's the question. What makes you happy? Now, that's a simple question, right? But when you think about it, at the end of the day, at the end of your life, the way that you've answered that question will determine for you how you've spent your life. And I bring it up because some of you know what makes you happy. You have figured it out and you have experienced it. The challenge is that you forget. And so it's really good for you to just be reminded every once in a while. And then there's others of you that, to be honest, have no idea what makes you happy. And here's how you can tell. You aren't happy. Because really, you have not been able to figure out what it is in this world that makes you happy. And so I just want to throw this out there. If you're somebody who just keeps trying to be happy and you aren't happy, it might be that you haven't learned how to be happy. And so at the risk of just sounding ridiculously presumptuous, today I'm going to try to tell you what makes you happy. And if you're sitting here and you're like, listen, bright colored shirted preacher guy, you don't even know me, okay? You don't even know me. How are you going to know? I just want to say, hey, that might be true. I don't, But before you just check out, you might want to hang in there long enough to hear what I have to say. And then if you disagree, feel free to disagree. That's okay. You can disagree quietly to yourself. But you can walk away disagreeing in your heart if you need to. So what is it that makes you happy? Well, here's something that I think most of us have discovered. That happiness is more about a who than a what. It's more about who than what. And this is, I think, for many of us, one of the life lessons that we learned very early in life. For many of us, we learned it in the backyard. Because at some point, you were a little kid and you were playing in the backyard and it didn't really matter what you had, right? It just mattered that there were a bunch of who's that were there with you. That was all that mattered. And then you went to elementary school. And if you found a group of who's, it didn't really matter what you guys had. And then you went to middle school and high school. And you think about it, it didn't really matter what you had as long as you could find yourself amidst the right group of who's, right? Over the years, I've watched youth leaders at our church, at other churches, other places, try to plan events for teenagers. And it's maddening because they're trying to figure out who's coming to this thing, who's going with us, how many cars do we need, how much space do we need, right? And they're like, who's in? Who's coming? But the challenge is that before students will commit to being anywhere and doing anything, there is one question that they almost always ask. And it's not, what exactly are we doing? And it's not, how much will it cost? And it's not, how long will it take? It's not any of that kind of stuff. You know what they ask? Who is going to be there? Right? They're not committing to anything until they know who is going to be there because they intrinsically know happiness is more about a who than a what. In fact, if I was Dr. Seuss, I would say it this way. Happiness is always about a who or two. And then the more grown-up version would be that happiness at its core is always, always, always about relational connectedness. Now you think about it. If happiness was truly about a what, we could all just go out and get our hands on our happy what, and we'd just be happy all the time. Right? Because it wouldn't matter how you treated me. It wouldn't matter if you included me. It wouldn't matter if you liked me. It wouldn't matter if you respected me. None of that would matter because, see, I could just go home and grab my happy what and be happy. But you know how the happy what thing goes. Happy what always leads to happy what's next. Right? Like in the world of economics, the big phrase for this in the world of economics is the law of diminishing returns. You heard that? Happiness stemming from a what will always wear off eventually. You think about it, like you maybe you're super excited because you just got a new phone. That is awesome, right? Does anybody in here have a new phone? Nobody's got a new phone? There's not a single... Hannah, Johnny, you got a new phone? What do you got? iPhone 7. Well, isn't that cool? So you get, you get your new phone. You get your new phone and you're excited about your new phone. But if you think back, just travel back a little bit, you were just as excited about your old phone when you got it, right? And then it got old, and you felt like, I need a new phone, and pretty soon your new phone will be old, and guess what? You're going to need a new phone, an iPhone 37 or whatever. And the same is true with your car, or your purse, or your vacation. Happy what always leads to happy what's next. There is no what that will provide for you lasting happiness. Well, we get so attached to all of our whats, especially in our culture where the whats are abundant to us. And so one of the most shocking things for our teams, when we take teams to Haiti, one of the things that people for the first time going to Haiti will usually notice is this. They look around and they look around at all the people and they go, they got nothing, and yet they are so happy. How is that possible? Well, it's because happiness is really more about a who than a what. And while they lack all the whats that we got, they still have plenty of who's. Or maybe you think about it this way. In the end, you will have relational, not possessional regrets. So in the end, nobody makes things right with a what, right? Ladies, you're not going to say, honey, oh, baby, I really need you to bring to the hospital my shoes. Right? I just need one more time with my shoes. Or your stamp collection, or your gun collection, or your, whatever collection. Guys, you're not going to plead with the nurse to wheel you out into the parking lot to just get a little more time with your car. In the end, you're not going to make peace with any whats. In the end, it's always, 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 and we know this, it's always about who's. Because happiness is relational in nature. Now, when you hear that, honestly, here's what I'm anticipating. There's a group of you, primarily men, if we can be honest, and here's what we think when we hear that. We hear okay, pastor dude, that's cute and all, but I got to tell you, I don't need anyone to be happy. Because I can do this all by myself. I can be happy without anyone. And so let me say, if that's you and you're just feeling a little pushback, my sense is that there's two kinds of people that think that way. I don't need anyone in order to be happy. The first group is those of you who have so many people in your life that you've never really experienced being alone. Not truly. You've always had friends and family and people around you that love you. You're so thoroughly inundated with people like that that you really have no idea what it would actually be like to be isolated. It's like someone with food everywhere, just like abundance of food everywhere, saying, hey, well, I don't need food. Yeah, okay, but you have no idea what it's like to go hungry. Now, I will tell you, if I'm not careful, I can fall into that category because I have been unbelievably blessed in my life. I have had people around me my entire life. I've hardly had to go 30 seconds in my life without having relational options available to me. And many of you, you're in that group, and you are so blessed. And so, see, for me to get up here and say, yeah, I don't need anybody, would be so arrogant. Because I have no idea. I have no idea what it would actually be like to not have people. For people with lots of relational options, it's so easy to be deceived and just to think to ourselves, well, I don't need people. Okay. So that's group number one. There's a second group. And the second group is folks that are experiencing isolation. They're experiencing isolation, and so they tell themselves they're fine. In other words, they're relationally isolated, and they can't seem to fix it, and since they don't think anything can be done about it, they just tell themselves, I'm fine. Like, I don't need anybody. I'm a rock. And so let me just say it this way. When we can't get what we want, we tell ourselves we don't really want it, right? It's just a defense mechanism. We don't want to feel frustrated. We don't want to feel disappointed. So we tell ourselves everything's fine. And we've all done this, I think. We've all done this at some point in our lives with something. But when it comes to relational connectedness, this is deadly. Because to be happy, to be whole, you need other people. You do. And so let me summarize to this point. If I ask the question, what makes you happy? I think one way to answer that could be no thing. Okay, are you with me? No thing. Because it is more about a who than a what. Could be about a group of who's, but it is not about a what. See, there is no thing that will make you happy. And so just to try to get this kind of ingrained in our hearts and in our minds, I want to repeat that together, okay? What makes you happy? Okay, one more. That was kind of weak. What makes you happy? No thing. So whatever it is that makes you happy, it's not a what. But I think, honestly, we need to take this even one step further. And here's something else. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy. The more you're about you, the less happy you'll be. The more you focus on you, the less you focus on the yous around you. In fact, if you were able to get yourself exactly the way you want yourself, whatever that is, so like the right size, right, the right shape, the right income, the right car, the right everything, if you could actually get you just the way you want you, it won't make you happy. Now, this is counterintuitive because we just naturally think, well, but if I could just get certain things, if I could just have certain things, if I could just live a certain way, a certain lifestyle, if I could have a certain level of health, if I could have a certain look, if I could just, tone down a little here and tighten up a little there, I really do. I think I'd be happy. But the truth is, you cannot consume, acquire, or exercise your way to happiness. In fact, if you get obsessively focused on any of those things, you will end up less happy in the end. And here's why. Because at its core, all of this stuff is you being about you. And there's, like many of you know, there's a ton of research on this stuff. Have you seen? I mean, it's everywhere. And here's what the research says time and time again. You cannot consume, acquire, or exercise your way to happiness, but you can serve or volunteer your way there. Now, before you go, again, some of you, you're like, okay, pastor dude, what's your agenda in that? You want me to volunteer for something, don't you? There's going to be a sign-up sheet at the end of this message, and you're going to ask me to volunteer. Let me just say, no. There's no agenda. I got nothing for you to sign up for today. This is not some desperate plea for volunteers. This is just, when you think about it, an essential part of pursuing happiness. And many of you know this because you've experienced it. You know it. You've experienced it. But also, there is an incredible amount of research on this. All over the world, in different cultures, researchers have asked, is there a connection between happiness and selflessness? Is there a connection between, get this, between health and selflessness? Is there a connection between health and happiness and like volunteering and serving? And if you go like after this, wait till after this, but if you go after this and get like on a computer and you look into it, you'll discover that there is project after project after project, and they keep coming to the same conclusion, that there is, in fact, a powerful connection between health, happiness, and people's willingness to serve or be selfless. University of Chicago did a study asking the question, what are the most fulfilling careers? And they made a list of the most fulfilling careers. And here's what they came up with. There were a lot of careers that sort of all fell under the same umbrella, so they just sort of put them into categories. But here's what they came up with for the most satisfying jobs. They said the most satisfying jobs are one where people are caring for others. That was number one. Number two is teaching others. Number three is protecting others. What are those common denominator in those top three? Others. Yeah, and then there's creative pursuits. So that was just number four. Just wanted to be honest with you that they weren't all others. But they also discovered that, and this is interesting, there's actually no income level associated with job satisfaction or happiness once it gets to a certain point. So once a person has reached a certain level of income, once they basically have reached a point where they can eat and they can pay the bills and they can like live indoors, higher levels of income beyond that do not equate to higher levels of happiness. And it turns out the most job happiness occurs within careers that are about other people. You care for other people, teach other people, protect other people. Careers that are fundamentally about other people. Okay, and then there's, creative pursuits, like music and art and photography and all that. I guess that brings people joy, I don't know. There was another study done, and this was done in the UK. They looked at 40 different studies. There was kind of an assessment of studies that asked the question, is there a connection between happiness and selflessness, between happiness and health and serving other people? And they looked at 40 studies that had been conducted over a 20-year period, and they discovered some really extraordinary links between volunteering, health, and happiness. Now, this is not like people who like volunteered one time 10 years ago. Okay, that's not how they measured this. This is like people who have organized their lives around regularly carving out time to serve other people. It could be in the community, it could be in their church, it could be overseas, it could be in their schools, it could be any of that, but it's something that's regular in their lives. And here's what they found about links between volunteering, health, and happiness. They discovered that people that do that regularly have less depression. They have less heart disease. How about that? They have lower stress, less drug abuse, and less unplanned pregnancies. And so the last two was kind of interesting because for teenagers, they discovered that teenagers who like volunteer somewhere regularly, that group had far less drug abuse and far less unplanned pregnancy. In fact, and I think this is kind of unexpected, they discovered that like even if you have to force your teenager to volunteer somewhere, you should. Because they found that volunteering with a bad attitude still has positive results. And here's some other links that they found. And this is worth paying attention to. People who volunteer regularly, they have better psychological well-being, they're better physical health overall, higher self-esteem, greater life expectancy, so they live longer, and they have a higher quality of life. And this is just like, I was tempted to just go off and spend like an hour on research, but I think you get the point. And I would just encourage you, if you're interested in that, look into it for yourself. But to summarize kind of the research, we could say one of the best things you could ever do for yourself is not focus so much on yourself. Now, the research on this is overwhelming, and that leads the scientists, and this is kind of interesting if you start reading these studies and stuff. It leads the scientists and the researchers to come up with theories, right? Because whenever you see a phenomenon, you want a theory for why. Why does this happen? And so the researchers and the scientists, many of which are not, Christian or they're secular, so they want to know, why is it that self-absorbed people struggle while selfless, other-centered people thrive? And of course, if you're not someone who follows Jesus or you're not a religious person, then you've got to come up with some sort of like evolutionary theory. And I was just kind of reading through this stuff, and I saw one theory that said that men are especially encouraged toward selflessness because women find it sexy. That this is actually all part of the mating ritual. And I was like, okay, maybe that explains why Jen is so powerfully drawn to me. She's so turned on by my selflessness. Because some of you are like, how did you ever get hurt? So the deal is she can't help it. It's just evolutionary development, man. There's all these theories, right? Based on evolution, and that's fine. All these attempts to explain why selfless people are happier, but I'm wondering, as someone who follows Jesus, I'm wondering if there might be a simpler explanation. And could it be that this is how you and I have been designed by God? Could it be that human beings are actually designed to be selfless? That God has designed you so that if you want to be filled up, you have to find a way then to pour yourself out. And it turns out, really, I think that science is confirming what Jesus' followers have always known, that when you pour yourself out, somehow you get filled up. It's this incredible mystery. The more you pour yourself out, the more you get filled up. And that's why the New Testament is filled with all of these commands that could all be sort of summarized as the one another's. You know what I mean by the one another's? All the stuff that we're invited to live. Love one another, care for one another, serve one another, forgive one another, carry one another's burdens. See, if we actually live that stuff out, we find ourselves filled. Why? Because we were created by God to one another. And selfishness, which comes so naturally to us, it turns out it isn't natural at all. It's not part of our original design. God did not create us that way. Selfishness is central to all the junk that came flooding in at the fall. In fact, if you really think about it, all sin is some form of selfishness. And one reason that God is so opposed to it is because it isolates us. See, sin isolates me from you, and it'll isolate you from me. What happens is, when you really think about it, is that sin separates us into our own self-centered worlds. That's what sin does. Sin whispers into my ear, Jason, spend all your time and all your resources on you. Jason, if you want to be happy, then you need to make life more about you. But of course, the more I do that, the less happy I become. And so here's what I've had to discover over and over. God is saying to me time and time again, if you want to be happy, you have to find a way to give yourself away. And so I just want to pause here, and I just want to say to you, if you're here this morning, and the prevailing feeling that you have in your life is emptiness, if you struggle with bitterness and anger and jealousy and emptiness, and you're thinking that focusing more on you is just what you need, you could not be more wrong. Here's the deal. Here's the secret that happy people learn. If you want to be happy, you have to find a way to give yourself away. You will never be happy as long as it's all about you. Even if you get everything that it is that you're seeking, even if you become the best possible version of you, even if you get the income, even if you get the job, even if you get the booming body, even if you get the car and the house and all the respect, if all of it is all about you, in the end, you're always going to feel empty. And so I just want to invite you just to think about the happiest people that you've known in your life. Think about the happiest people you've known. Because here's what I bet you'll find. Here's the common denominator. I bet it's not body fat. I bet it's not income level. I bet it's not career success. I bet it's not other accomplishments. When you see people that are truly, truly happy, I think the common denominator, one way or another, is that they have found a way to give themselves away. They've learned how to pour themselves out. They've discovered a context for it, and they do it regularly. They know, and this is what brings them peace and joy and happiness, they know that their life is making a meaningful contribution to other lives. And so it really comes down to this. There are two ways of living. I can make it about me, or I can pour myself out. And there's a very famous passage in the book of Galatians. The Apostle Paul, who wrote Galatians, which isn't really a book, it's just a letter that he wrote to his friends in the province of Galatia, a place that he had been and started a church. And he writes to them, and in that letter he compares two opposite approaches to life. And so he starts with the first approach. He says, the acts of the flesh are obvious. Now, if you've grown up in church or you've been in church a lot, you've heard this verse. But when Paul talks about the acts of the flesh, here's the gist of what he's talking about. He's saying, if you were to just do whatever you want to do, okay, this is the flesh. You just do whatever you want to do. And if you were able to get away with anything, if you were able to do whatever you want to do, and there wouldn't be any consequences, okay? Your wife wouldn't find out. Your husband wouldn't find out. Your mom wouldn't find out. Your kids wouldn't find out. So you could do whatever you want to do, and it would never come back to haunt you. If you just let your natural impulses rule, without restraint, just do what you want to do as much as you want to do it with whomever you want to do it for as long as you want to do it, and you'd never run out of money, and you'd never get in trouble with the law. If there were no consequences stopping you, if you decided it's just completely 100% all about you, here's the kind of stuff that you'd see. And Paul just rattles off this list. He says, here's what the acts of the flesh are. He says the acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery. Okay, so what is he talking about? He's talking about just super excessive sexual behavior. He says idolatry and witchcraft, which means doing anything possible to control and manipulate outcomes for your own benefit. And hatred and discord and jealousy and fits of rage. Okay, so anger with other people that have what you want and you can't seem to get your hands on it, or that are in the way of what it is that you want. Selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy. More bitterness with people that have more than me, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. He just goes on. And he says, if you were to just go with the flow of all of your natural inclinations, so just unrestrained selfishness, that's what it looks like. And this is really the pursuit of pleasure without any regard for others. It's just unrestrained selfishness. It's me, all about me, to the extreme. And see, this stuff flows out of an attempt that we all have to feed some kind of appetite. And the problem is, when you feed an appetite, it doesn't go away, right? An appetite, when you feed it, what happens to it? It grows. It requires more. It eventually becomes insatiable, which always leads to bitterness and anger and envy and greater emptiness. So Paul says there's a better way to live. Because if you try to live by the flesh, to satisfy like these growing appetites that are growing out of control, it will leave you wanting more every time. It could be an appetite for sex. It could be an appetite for stuff. It could be an appetite for recognition, right? For people finally giving you the credit that you deserve. Whatever it is, these are appetites. And they will never fully be satisfied. And then he says, and he contrasts that. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit. And this is the contrast. It's the fruit of the Spirit versus acts of the flesh. It's the fruit of the Spirit that comes when you finally say to your Heavenly Father, God, I'm tired of just living for myself. Like this is not working. God, I'm tired of just trying to fill myself up. Because the harder I work to fill myself up, the less full I feel. It just leaves me frustrated and angry and moody and mad at everybody all the time. And so in contrast, I want to let go of all that. God, I just want to let go of all that and simply come to you and say, help me to do and be what you want me to do and what you want me to be. Help me to look around as much as possible and be a blessing to as many people as I can. And so Paul says, when you actually come to a place where you relax and let go and say, it's not all about me, something happens. And he calls it the fruit of the Spirit. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace. And I don't know why NIV changed this to forbearance. Who in the heck knows what forbearance means? It means patience. Well, it used to say patience. Why don't they just leave it? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Paul says when you finally let go of trying to fill yourself through selfish pursuits, this is the kind of stuff that God will fill you with. And then Paul says something that I think we're tempted to kind of just read past, and maybe you've read this over and over and never really thought about it. But this is a huge idea. He makes an incredible observation, and he says, against such things there is no law. What? Here's what he's saying. He's saying, like, let's go back to our list of fruits. Okay, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. He's saying, guys, you were made for this. This right here is the environment in which you flourish. So, like, imagine if your current family was just completely characterized by love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Imagine a family that was totally characterized by those things. Would you be happy to be a part of that? Of course you would. Okay, of course you would. And the reason you intuitively know it would be great is because you were designed for this. You were designed to live in a community that's characterized by these things. So imagine like if your workplace was characterized by these things, or if your neighborhood was characterized by these things, or your city. Imagine if our nation was completely characterized by that stuff. And then think about this. Like, if that was the case, what would the police do? They what? Care for others. Good, yeah. I mean, so like imagine that you're a police officer and you're directing traffic, right? And you have to direct people because everyone at the four-way stop's like, no, you go first. No, you go first, right? The police are like, you go, you know? It'd be a totally different world. Because everyone would naturally wait for everybody else. And this is community. This is a community, this is a kind of community where there's almost no need for any kind of law. Because if I'm totally in this for what's in it for you, if I'm totally committed to whatever is in your best interest, and if you're committed to whatever is in my best interest, then the reality is we can probably figure out just about anything. We don't need courts, we don't need judges, we don't need police, we don't need prisons. There's almost no need for any kind of law because we can solve almost any problem. We can sleep at night with all of our doors unlocked without any kind of fear. Now, think of the happiness level of people in that community. Paul says, guys, this is what you're created for. Okay, you were made for this. And so the more selfless you are, the happier you will be. And I think that we all intrinsically know this. I mean, you think about it, like you just think about end of life stuff. How do we measure the value of a life? How do we measure the value of a life? How do we determine if someone really lived a good life? Well, imagine you're at a funeral and somebody comes up to speak about the deceased. Here are a bunch of things that they will never talk about. Okay. They'll never bring up how immoral the person was. Whoops. How impure, how indulgent, hateful, how jealous they always were. Right? You ever hear that at a funeral? How divisive. They just made everybody hate each other. How drunk they were all the time. I mean, you never bring that stuff up at someone when you're honoring someone's life. That kind of stuff is never exalted. Now, you will never hear someone say, man, this guy made such an incredible contribution to our community. He slept with every woman he could get in the sack with. Like he was jealous all the time and angry with everybody. He was totally selfish, argued with everyone. And when he wasn't drunk, he was like asleep. Man, he lived such an inspiring life. Like, these are the kinds of things that we never bring up at the end because we know intuitively that these are the kinds of things that have no value. They make no contribution. These flow out of seeking pleasure without regard for others. These flow out of runaway appetites. Now, people characterized by these things aren't happy, and we know that. And they don't make people around them happy. It's just the opposite. And so, isn't it true that the value of a life is always measured by how much of it was given away? That's what we celebrate at the end, right? That's what we all know is most important. Giving your life away is what makes you great. When someone lives a life like that, we think, okay, now that was a great man. We think, okay, now that was a great woman. And you know what else is usually true of them? We say, and not only did they pour themselves out and give themselves away, but they were so content, right? And they were so happy because they discovered the secret of life, that pouring yourself out is actually what it is that fills you up. And we all know this, right? Like we know this, and yet, like all of us, I'm tempted to get up every single day and try to consume my way to happiness, right? And I'm telling you, like this is the daily battle, and I get this wrong all the time. And thankfully, God gave me a 16-year-old named Cameron to remind me of this great truth. So we'll be sitting downstairs, and he's like, Dad, wouldn't you be happier if you served and gave me the remote? He seriously says this. And they kind of wink at me, And so I'm just like, shut up, Cam. We're going to watch Mariners reruns from the 90s. Because watching the Mariners win makes me really happy, and so I have to watch 1995 again and again. So I get this. I'm not some head in the clouds kind of guy. Just like everybody else, I live with this tension every moment of every day. And I'm not telling you what I do, that I get this right all the time. I am telling you that if you want to be happy, you have got to find a way to consistently give your life away. If you want to be filled, you have to find somewhere and some way to pour yourself out. And I'm not talking about hey, once a decade, I'm going to do this really big thing, or once a year, I always do this. I'm talking about consistently pouring yourself out. And so I want to close by just asking you, just pausing here and getting serious for a second and asking you to think about what are your goals these days? I mean, what are the things that you think about? What are the things that you dream about? What are the things that you are pouring the most energy into pursuing? And my question for you is, if you get everything that you want, who besides you wins? As you try to find something to fill you up, think about your life. As you try to find something that will fill you up, how much of your effort is being spent pouring yourself out? Because here's what I know to be true. If you are looking to consume your way to happiness, if you're looking to achieve your way to happiness, if you're looking to like exercise your way to happiness, like if a perfectly sculpted body is your ultimate hope, you may never, ever, ever truly be filled. And this is the great reversal. That to be filled up, you have to pour yourself out. And I think this is exactly what Jesus was getting at when he said, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. And so, here's today's little word that if it's used often and in the right context can change your life. If you want to be filled on the inside, you have to pour yourself, what? Out. I mean, we are so hardwired to think in. Look at all the stuff I need. I got to get something in. Your life has to become all about out. Now, what does that mean for you? What does it mean for you? I don't know. Like, where do you start? I don't know. How do you start? I don't know. But here's what I do know. One of the best things that you can do for yourself is not focus so much on yourself.